Make sure you guys hit the subscribe button if you guys are enjoying the content that we're throwing up. And make sure you guys hit the like button if you enjoy the video. And yeah, let's begin. Okay, so I have been a ridiculously huge fan of Donny Cates' Guardians of the Galaxy run. Honestly, I'm a fan of whatever Donny Cates writes. I mean, like, his Venom is what really set it off for me. I was like, dude, this is legit. But his Guardians of the Galaxy run is nuts. It's absolutely amazing. So here's a cool thing. So Guardians of the Galaxy comes out directly from like the Thanos legacy story, essentially, right? Where you learned that like Thanos had a last will and testament. So we covered that story. Check that video down in the description. All that you really find out is that, like, you know, after Thanos' death, where his body's destroyed and Ghost Rider pees on his corpse, it's kind of messed up. that his brother Eros shows up and then basically like pulls out this, you know, giant metal piece from inside Thanos, which contains like his last will and testament. And that's basically where like this picks up, right? So, I mean, that's really the big takeaway from the story. So I guess, you know, I mean, I would watch it because I think it's kind of important to know a lot of what goes on. But following that set of events, we basically pick up on, you know, what used to be Thanos' ship with regards to like Eros and a whole gathering together of various people. And the reason why is because Eros basically says like Thanos has a last will. Thanos has like a singular last message for every single person in existence. Now, it is kind of a cool little thing here because we actually have some characters that we haven't seen for a while. We've got Captain Universe out here. There's also Wraith, who we'll talk about here in a little bit. You've got the Starjammers. You've got like you got a whole host of people, basically like the cosmic landscape of Marvel. Remember, Guardians of the Galaxy was always a cosmic team, so it makes sense that you would deal with like, you know, mostly the cosmic characters who were here. In any event, like once this message is, you know, displayed by Thanos, then his statement is, okay, so like I'm dead if you're seeing this, but it's not the end of me, because what I've done is I've put my consciousness in somebody, and one of you is going to become the new me. Peace. Like, that's basically it. That's basically his last will and testament. And it's kind of a cool thing because what it does is it literally sends the cosmic community into disarray. Because the question everybody has is, well, then who's going to be the new Thanos? Now, the question becomes, you know, if that's the case, then who is the new Thanos going to be and how's he going to manifest himself? Now, it's kind of a cool moment because remember, Thanos is all about seeding chaos, right? I mean, it's really a love for Mistress Death. And under normal circumstances, we would say it's kind of out of character for Thanos to just be like, panic for the whole universe. But Thanos kind of loves doing that stuff, right? Like, it's his own little bit of revenge on the whole universe. Kind of the legacy he leaves behind is, you know, yes, my physical form is dead, but I'm still going to cause all kinds of problems. And so it's kind of a cool little moment because then when you switch over to Peter Quill and Groot, they of course are traveling out to nowhere so they can get some drinks and so on and so forth, only to find out that the whole damn thing has vanished. And so it's kind of like, okay, so this is a little bonkers. But again, sort of switching back over to the discussion between Eros and all these guys, one of the things to bear in mind when it comes to Eros is he is the biological brother of Thanos. But Eros was always kind of considered to be like the weaker version, right? I mean, Thanos is brute strength. I mean, he's super powerful. He's got all kinds of cosmic abilities. And then he's also got like enhancements he's made using his own modifications. And then of course, enhancements that were given to him by Mistress Death. So he's an exceedingly powerful character. Eros is a guy who can emit pheromones, basically. They get people to kind of see him in a much lighter tone, and he can kind of get them to do things that he wants them to do. But what he does is he makes a list and says, these are all the people that Thanos would most likely upload his consciousness into based on their own abilities or powers or so on and so forth. And this is a very important thing here because this list is really kind of Donny Cates' way of saying these are what Thanos considers to be some of the more formidable people out there. When it comes to someone like Venom, he's insanely deadly because he's a symbiote. He can bond himself to anyone. If Thanos were to upload his consciousness into the Venom symbiote, then he could literally jump from one host body to the next. I mean, imagine if Thanos was Venom. Like, that would be crazy. You know, the Incredible Hulk, that speaks for itself. Mephisto, that speaks for itself. He's a super powerful demon entity. Iron Man, his intelligence is what makes him so dangerous. Odin has a huge amount of power. Nick Fury, because of the influence he has, there's a lot of people here who are incredibly dangerous, powerful, or intelligent, or a combination of all three. And so because of that, the first thing that Eros says is, these are the most likely candidates, but then there's one who stands above all. It's most likely Gamora. We have to go find her, and we have to basically kill her. And it's kind of an interesting thing because remember, Gamora kind of went rogue during the events of Infinity Wars, which I kind of wish that Donny Cates hadn't referenced it. That way we could pretend that it never happened, which would really help like everybody everywhere. But because of the fact that he does, we have to assume it did, which kind of sucks. But nonetheless, you know, with her as a character, because she had essentially gone rogue, she's really just kind of out there and we don't really know what she's doing, but she is exceedingly deadly. And in fact, it makes sense that if Thanos was going to upload his consciousness into somebody, that it would be Gamora because she's the one that killed him. And so it's a cool little moment there. But of course, in the middle of all this, they're all met by the arrival of like the head, like nowhere, the head of the giant celestial, which in turn like blows the ship in half. Everybody jumps in and starts fighting, and then like they're met with the arrival of the Black Order. Now, it's interesting that Donny Cates does this, and in all honesty, honesty, I'm not a huge fan of it because I love the idea of the Black Order, especially like during, Jonathan Hickman's whole Avengers and New Avengers run. The problem with this is that the Black Order turned into exactly what everybody knew they were going to turn into, or at least people who read comics knew what they were going to turn into, which is essentially flunkies and lackeys. And that's it. They're just kind of plot devices and they're there to do things and no one really focuses on them. I mean, there is an actual Black Order comic, but I'm not really a huge fan of it because it doesn't give us anything that we haven't seen before. And it doesn't really show them as dangerous as they could be. I mean, like the Ebony Maw is probably the most dangerous member of the Black Order because he just talks you into doing things that you don't want to do. He doesn't really have any powers. He's just really, really good at like talking to people, getting them to do things. But nonetheless, in the middle of all this, you of course have like Groot who basically tells Peter Quill, yeah, man, we were kind of invited to that meeting, but like I thought it would be dumb, so I just didn't tell you because I'm kind of being a dick. In the middle of the battle, Proxima Midnight fires this cannon that opens a black hole and just starts sucking everything in. It's kind of crazy. Now, of course, this basically leads to like Peter Quill and them getting there at like the nick of time. And when they do, like the hammer of Beta Ray Bill comes out, which is attached to a chain, which of course has Beta Ray Bill attached to it, alongside like a handful of others who he managed to get a hold of, but the numbers are pretty thin. I mean, for the most part, a lot of lives have been lost. We've got Moondragon, the daughter of Drax the Destroyer. You've got Beta Ray Bill, you've got Phyla-Vell, who's basically the new Quasar, Cosmic Ghost Rider, and that's basically it. These are really the only ones that seem to have been saved or pulled out by Beta Ray Bill. Now, of course, we also end up finding the reason why the Black Order's here is to get the body of Thanos, and then in turn, like bring that body of Thanos to essentially like the one person who's seeking it and the one person who can bring him back, Hela. But this is a very important thing here. For years and years and years in Marvel Comics, Hela was kind of ambiguous in the sense that people didn't know if she was an aspect of Mistress Death or if Hela was her wholly unique character. And a lot of that goes into the fact that Hela predates Mistress Death. But then when you had basically a version of Death for the Asgardians and then a version of Death for basically everybody else, then how do you reconcile those two? And Donny Cates does it like that. What he basically does is he starts having, the Black Order reference Mistress Death as a wholly different person and even tell Hela, not even you can defy her will. So it's kind of a cool thing. Basically, like Mistress Death is a wholly different character from Hela, seemingly a lot more powerful, and the two of them are not one and the same at all. So it's actually a big moment that I think went unnoticed by a lot of different people. But that goes into the Black Order basically tracking down Collector and saying, where's the head of Thanos? Which of course the Collector would have because he would pay an insane amount of money for something like that. I mean, the head of Thanos is a huge thing for someone like the Collector. And so like when he basically refuses to divulge information, that's when Hela shows up and says, hey, look, like either you can give it to me or I can kill you. Now, this is kind of a cool little moment because what this does is it shows the Collector knows who Hela is, right? Like he's aware of who she is. And that's one of the important things to bear in mind is that if you're reading stories in isolation, right? Like you're only reading Thor or you're only reading Iron Man or you're only reading Captain America or Guardians of the Galaxy, you don't really see a lot of crossover here. You kind of see it in major events. That's the nature of how those events function, but you don't really see a lot of crossover outside of that. But if you kind of read all those stories in their totality, that's to say kind of reading them, reading multiple stories as a singular entity and you view them that way, then what you basically learn is that there comes a point when beings approach or exceed a level of power that everybody just kind of knows who they are, if for no other reason than the fact that they're just so powerful. And when you're talking about a version of Death, basically like this Asgardian concept that exists out there and basically deals with like the realm of the dead, it would make sense that with that level of power would also come like recognition. And so it's kind of a cool little moment here because then following that, what you basically do is you pick up with Eros and Gladiator and these guys who somehow managed to survive this whole, crazy ordeal inside this black hole. And then in turn, like they're met with the arrival of Wraith. Now, Wraith is a character that we have never talked about in Marvel Comics. And the reason why is because we never had a reason to, right? I mean, there was never really a reason to talk about the character of Wraith. But what Donny Cates does here is actually tie him into the greater universe. The way this worked originally when Wraith first popped up is he's part of a group called the Nameless. And all that means is that somewhere along the line, a handful of Kree were essentially just kind of like yanked into a different dimension that was home to like these weird little parasitic organisms that would latch onto you and then basically start consuming your soul. But in return for that, they would basically give you like immortality, an inability to feel pain, like an insane healing factor, like super strength and speed and all that kind of cool stuff. They would enhance you and basically make you more powerful than you were before. And they would enhance you based on what powers you have, right? So like if you're a Kree, you become a more powerful version of a Kree. And then following that, he just kind of showed up and then did some things and had some cool moments, during Annihilation. But again, he was never supremely interesting in this. What is cool about this is Donny Cates changes all that. And what Donny Cates says is that the Nameless, like these little parasites that exist out there were actually created by Null, the symbiote god. And so what this basically means is that like the function and form of Wraith is a byproduct of Null, the symbiote god. And what Wraith is looking to do is basically find information that can allow him to either reverse the process or somehow defeat Null or get a hold of him or whatever the case is to essentially like go back to the way he was Thanos before to escape this fate that's been bestowed upon him. So it's a really cool way to take what is by all standards of measurement an exceedingly obscure character, roll him larger into the Marvel universe, and then in turn like go forward from there. But of course this leads to Nebula basically speaking up and of course addressing the crowd and saying, hey look, we don't know where Gamora is. Nobody knows where Gamora is save for one person, and it's the one person she only ever really loved, that she ever really gave her heart to, which of course those of you guys who are familiar with Marvel's history, you guys know this is none other than Richard Rider, and it is good to see him return. Richard Rider, I have missed you, buddy. It's been a little while. Yes, you returned during the Nova comics, and yes, there were some cool moments, but it just wasn't the same. It's cool to see Richard Rider come back. I actually kind of dig this. But of course, you know, with the Collector basically telling Hela and her forces that the head of Thanos was sold to the negative zone, they end up traveling there and come into contact with Annihilus. Now, Hela's showing up here, and this is kind of an important thing. Hela's showing up here and then basically just like kind of running off to Annihilus and causing problems for him is actually a gamble. And that's one of the ways that Annihilus works, right? I mean, Annihilus can be intimidated. He's very, very powerful with the Cosmic Control Rod, which is essentially the negative zone version of the power cosmic, the power that Galactus wields, but he can still be intimidated. And her showing up here and basically saying, hey, look, like, you know, give me what I want or I will kill you, and instilling fear in him in that regard, he ends up doing what she wants and ends up giving her the head of Thanos. But the reality is that if he really channeled the full totality of the Cosmic Control Rod, he could kill Hela here. He could destroy her. And that's one of the cool things, is basically like he doesn't call her bluff. You know, I mean, she's able to injure him and damage him, but like at the same time, he could wipe her out in her entirety. But basically he succumbs to like being bluffed. But of course, this leads to Richard Rider being tracked down and chased down by Gladiator and really the forces of Eros. And then of course, you know, it leads to Wraith showing up and saying, hey, look, give me the location of Gamora or I'll do like terrible things to you. And it's really more of like an intimidation factor. But then you have Cosmic Ghost Rider who steps in, and you never really see this part of him. That's why I'm glad that Donny Cates is writing this, because he can really kind of build on and expand on the characters that he essentially created. And so with that happening, Cosmic Ghost Rider's like, look man, like the problem that we have here is we have Gamora running around who kicked off the entire last Infinity Saga, so we know that she has no limit to the length she'll go to achieve a goal that she believes is right. She killed Peter Quill. She's basically Thanos. So like, we have to take her out. We have to eliminate her because she's essentially gone rogue. She's a villain. And the response of Richard Rider is no. And he essentially races off and leaves. And it's kind of a funny thing because where everybody seems to kind of look at that and say, well, we're sort of screwed now. We have no idea where he's going to go. I mean, yes, he's cut off from his own Nova Corps, but we have no idea where he's going to go. The response of Nebula is, that's because you're all idiots. Like, he's cut off from his own Nova Corps. He's bleeding out. He's injured. Where do you think he's going to go to? He's going to go to the only place that he feels safe. He's going to go to Gamora. And that's exactly what he does. It's a cool little moment, and it's a cool segment here because it's a great way for Donny Cates to really kind of throw back, and that's what this reminds me of. It reminds me of like Dan Abnett's whole like cosmic run on like Annihilation Conquest, War of Kings, Realm of Kings, all those things. That whole, you know, cosmic scope of Marvel that he essentially put together, right? I mean, you had like Jim Starlin and those guys, and the old school comic fans, you know, the old school hipster guys will be like, well, no, it was all Jim Starlin. Not really. Jim Starlin kind of created like some characters and like sort of told some cosmic stories, but the work that Jim Starlin did was dwarfed by the work that Dan Abnett did in terms of like all the cosmic scope, because he brought it all together and made it all cohesive and organized. So it was pretty awesome. Like it was really, really cool. But then like, of course, with the forces of you know, Peter Quill and all those guys basically realizing that what Gamora's done is she's showing up to the world where Rocket Raccoon seems to be at, they end up figuring out where she's at in their own way. And of course, Gladiator and those guys will track Richard Rider. This leads to a fight between Gamora and the forces of Peter Quill, which include like Beta Ray Bill and these guys. Now, here's an important thing to keep in mind. Can Gamora go toe-to-toe with Beta Ray Bill and defeat him through conventional means? No. What makes her cool about this, what makes it so interesting, is the fact that what she lacks in strength and the ability to like defeat him, she gains in like her intuitive tactics and her ability to use like military strategy to her side. And so when Beta Ray Bill throws his hammer and it basically ends up catching her off guard, this in turn leads her to like attach bombs to it so that when he summons it back, then it'll blow up in his hand. Now, she does that because she's familiar with Thor. Like, it's things like that that make her so dangerous and make her so capable. Her quick wit, thinking on the spot. This also leads to like Rocket Raccoon kind of peeking out and watching everything unfold. What's going on with Rocket Raccoon? We'll find out, but I'm not going to tell you in this video. So I know a lot of people are kind of like, boo hiss, boo hiss. But of course, this leads to Richard Rider showing up, kind of crash landing inside the ship and saying, hey, like we have to go find Gamora, and then realizing she's already there, but then calling Peter Quill an idiot, because what this does is this is going to lead to like a full-scale fight between the forces of Eros and the forces of the Guardians. And so you're talking about some pretty heavy hitters here, some very powerful guys. Among them, Wraith, Gladiator, Phyla-Vell, Moondragon, like you're talking about some pretty heavy hitters, any one of which could show up on Earth and give the Avengers a run for their money, if not take them out entirely. And in fact, like Moondragon's done that before. You're talking about some very, very heavy hitters, some very powerful guys here. Now, of course, this leads to like to Gamora basically breaking herself free after she was kind of locked in her room, you know, put in time out by Peter Quill, more or less. But of course, when that happens and like a shot is launched off, you end up having Peter Quill, who jumps in the way of the blast and seems to sacrifice himself for Gamora. And so following that, Gamora is taken by Gladiator and the Shi'ar, the Imperial Guard and the forces of Eros. And then of course, all you have left are the Guardians. And then everybody's kind of like, oh my God, Peter Quill's dead. No, he's dead. And Groot's like, no, he's just out. Like we can wake him up. And so like one of Groot's little stabby guys runs up on him. Can we also just say the little stabbies, like little pieces of Groot like break off and like become like little Groots that just like run around with knives and stab people? That's amazing, right? Like I am stabby. Dude, I love that. Like these little Groots, like these little mini Groots that are just like running around and stabbing the hell out of people. It's pretty awesome. Like it's actually pretty cool. But of course, when the question's asked, how are we going to find Gamora? Then of course you have Beta Ray Bill, who basically responds by saying, we'll call in a bloodhound. Now, this is actually a really important and a cool little thing that comes out of this. So one of the things that came out of Death of the Inhumans is that we actually ended up learning that Beta Ray Bill and Lockjaw had like a lot of adventures from back in the day, right? Like, we didn't know about them. I mean, they presumably happened off panel, but it was just kind of introduced in like, hey, like, yeah, like me and Lockjaw, like we had a whole bunch of adventures. Like it was a cool little thing. I feel like we need those comics, right? Like I feel like we need like Beta Ray Bill and Groot. Like we need that, you know, who knows what adventures they'll get into. Bill and Lockjaw invite you. Like we need that. Like we really like we need that comic. And I feel like Donny Cates needs to write it, because I feel like it would be the most fun ever. Like it'd be pretty sweet to see. But what you end up having, of course, is Gamora, who's basically brought before Eros. And again, the idea is we have to kill her because she's the most likely host for Thanos' new form. And then you have Hela, who shows up along with the Black Order, who take out Gladiator, literally like stab him through the chest, take out Gladiator. She totally takes out Cosmic Ghost Rider, literally just like eliminates Mephisto's hold on him, which is actually kind of cool because now this puts Hela on par with Mephisto in terms of the power that she possesses. So basically, Hela kills Cosmic Ghost Rider. Then you have like her basically spilling the beans to everyone and essentially saying, hey, look, you guys are all idiots. There was never any host body for Thanos. Why would Thanos put himself in anybody's host, like anybody's body? If Thanos is going to come back, Thanos is going to come back as himself. Thanos would never lower himself to the point where he would return in somebody else's form. And if he did, it would only ever be temporary. And so what she says is, okay, yes, like there is a kind of backup there, and it's actually in the mind of Eros, but he's not going to stay in your body. He's going to go back into his own body. And so literally, Thanos wakes up in the body of Eros, and then from there begins a process of transferring his consciousness into his old physical form and trying to bring himself back. And it's actually pretty badass, because this is essentially the return of Thanos. And so with him, you know, with these guys being whisked away, now you've got like what's left of the forces of Eros, who basically realize they'd been tricked. You've got the forces of the Guardians of the Galaxy, all of whom join together, and then they in turn race off over to Hela, and then like all hell starts breaking loose. But it's kind of a funny thing, because you've got Cosmic Ghost Rider who's there, and he starts talking to Peter Quill saying, hey, look, I can't hold my body together. I'm basically falling apart. This is where I die. And then he perishes only to be transferred to hell and to meet Johnny Blaze. And this is badass. Dude, this is one of the coolest things ever. And so from there, like Gamora, the Guardians, and so on and so forth, they all actually end up take out Eros. Like Gamora kills Eros like that, no questions asked, because she's just like, if he's the host body for Thanos, kill him and be done with it. And what this does is it cuts the transfer short. And so basically Thanos kind of returns, but like in this kind of garbled, nonsensical state, not fully himself, and then just is just sort of there. So basically he comes back as like a half measure. Now it's kind of cool, because what it would do is almost give us this kind of like psychotic Savage Hulk version of Thanos, which would be badass to see. The problem is we don't see it, because in the middle of all this, you end up having like Hela, who goes crazy, fires off like this cannon, intends to like take out Beta Ray Bill. Beta Ray Bill like knocks this giant bullet thing. It ends up like impaling Thanos. It kills him, and then like it opens up a black hole, basically the gun of Proxima Midnight. And so Thanos is like sucked inside of his own black hole. He's basically gone. His return is essentially stopped. So at the moment, Thanos is not coming back. It's kind of a cool little thing, but at the same time, it's kind of disappointing, because I always wanted Thanos to make his return. Like I always wanted Thanos to come back, because he's such an immutable and like, he's almost like a universal constant, right? Like a necessity. He's always been around, and he's actually one of the more interesting villains in Marvel Comics. And so with that happening, with the day more or less being saved, Peter Quill brings together what's left of the Guardians of the Galaxy. So you got Groot, Beta Ray Bill, Moondragon, you've got Phyla-Vell, Gamora, you've got Lockjaw, and then the question's asked, but like, what about Rocket Raccoon though? So of course, now they're on a mission to go find Rocket Raccoon. With that being said, guys, we're gonna bring this video to an end. If you are new here to Comics Explained, make sure you guys hit the sub button to become part of the Rob Corps. If you guys enjoyed this video, make sure you drop a like, and I will catch you all later. Peace.